Okay folks, we're going to jump straight into this one. So this is all about watering orchids, and basically what I'm going to do is just to talk you through what I've done for the past 2 to 3 years of watering orchids. Now, as you can see in here, there are lots of things that aren't orchids. In fact, I would say orchids actually constitutes the minority of my collection now. That doesn't mean I don't like orchids. I still absolutely adore orchids. Frankly, I just love plants. And even though I've kind of restricted myself to tropical plants, I love all plants, whether they're tropical or not. The whole tropical thing is just to get me inside somewhere really nice and bright and colourful with some scent, and get me out of what it is at the moment. In fact, I'll just show you what it's like at the moment. It's pretty horrible out there. Obviously it is February. It's pretty grey, miserable. I don't know if you can see out there. Let's just pull it up there and you see it's kind of rainy and wet and dark and grey. So watering orchids, let's try not to waste any time, Jeff. So what I want to know is my method of watering orchids, and by the way, it's a mess in here. There's all sorts going on at the moment. It's a horrendous mess and it all needs tidying up, and I will do it, I promise. So is my method of watering orchids killing them? That's the question I want to answer. And the more I think about this, the more I think that my method just isn't working. So let's talk you through what I actually do at the moment. And it's not ideal, and you're going to hate me for it, especially if you're an orchid purist. So I have a trug, okay? So what happens is I get all my water from a couple of water barrels outside. So these are from the roof of the garage. It's rainwater, but because I'm under trees, it also has all sorts of, for want of a better word, crap inside the water. Okay, so I know I'm opening myself up to pathogens there, I know that, but I would rather use that than use the water from the tap. And frankly, so far, 2 to 3 years I've been watering the orchids, so far, touch wood, it's not been a massive problem with regards to pathogens, so far. I know that could all change overnight, so far so good. Right, second thing, I then collect my orchids up, I put them over here, and one by one I hold them over this barrel, I get the water and I pour it into the orchid. Now, a couple of problems with that, and I'm sure you're all shouting at me straight away. Jeff, you share the water? Yes, I share the water, and that's a deliberate thing. It's not deliberate in as much as I want to open them up to the possibility of passing on diseases from one orchid to my entire collection. That's not why I do it. I'm just aware that that is a risk. The reason that I do that is because it's a compromise, and it's all about, as far as I'm concerned anyway, it's all about time management, and is that a compromise I'm willing to actually accept? And so far it has been a compromise I'm willing to accept. I could always get the water separately in a jug and just pour through the top, you know, get the water in a separate trug, pour it from one trug into another trug through the orchid, and then I would know that it was all different water. You know, they're not sharing water at all. The only problem with that is that I'm going to need an awful lot of water every time I water them. If I'm going to, every time I water every orchid in here, if I'm going to need water that is not shared from one plant to another, that's going to take a lot of water. And there are a lot of plants in here. There are an ever-increasing number of plants, which of course is the nature of the beast, isn't it? That's a decision that I made. I made that decision. I am totally aware of what could happen, but I do it because I don't want to spend my entire life watering orchids. I want some spare time alongside the, you know, very pleasurable activity of looking after the plants. I don't want it to take up every single minute of every single day. So I don't do that. I share the water. So far, not a problem. So what am I moaning about? Well, the problem as I see it is, and let's just pick up an orchid here. I'm trying to weave my way through all the junk that seems to have accumulated in here. So if I water something like this, so let's just pick this up. No, change my mind, I'll go for a different one. I'll tell you why in a second. So if I water something like this, so this is an Encyclia radiata, it does have another name, doesn't it? Prosthecia radiata. Okay, you can see it's very wet at the moment. So in this country, very grey outside, as you can see, and it is very cold at the moment because we're in the middle of February, in the middle of winter, right in the midst of winter. Now, various people have spotted and said to me that my orchids very often have this ribbing. Now, these particular ones, these are older pseudobulbs, so I'd expect that, but you can see the newer pseudobulbs don't have the ribbing, but they did up to a few days ago. So what's been happening, the way I've been watering them, I pour the water through there just once or twice, and that's it. That's the job done. Because of the way the weather is in this country, the temperature is through winter below 12 degrees, well below. I keep it to 12 degrees. So every day, 24 hours a day, all through winter, the temperature in this greenhouse is 12 degrees, which is very low. But the key factor is that it rarely gets that sunny. And because it rarely gets that sunny, it stays at 12 degrees. You never get that boost. Well, we do sometimes, but again, because of the way my greenhouse is situated, it only happens quite rarely. I have these massive trees and it blocks out a lot of the sun. So even if I get a full day of sunshine, I'm not going to get that. And for a certain length of the year, a certain time of the year, it's actually too low to actually raise above the houses in the garage nearby. So it just doesn't get the sun. So the temperature stays at 12 degrees, which means that at that cold, with that minimal amount of sunshine, I am such a high risk of rotting the orchid roots. Once I water them, they tend to stay wet practically throughout the rest of the winter. This is why I have lots of holes in these pots and I do my best to dry them out. This one is not that much of a problem actually. This one is pretty robust, but a lot of the orchids, that can be a problem. Okay, now here's the crux of the matter. Why then, when I water the orchids, do I end up with quite a large number of orchids with ribbed pseudobulbs, indicating that they're not getting enough water? Well, I think it's because, and again, I'm just postulating a theory here, I think it's because I'm not actually giving them enough by pouring the water through. The act of taking an orchid, pouring the water through, a lot of it, because it's just bark, it's very well drained, a lot of it just drains straight out. So even though some parts of the pot will actually stay moist for a long time, there's a lot of that root which will not get wet, or it will just be able to grab hold of what it can as the water goes past, and then it's gone. Now I remember watching something on, I don't know if some of you long-time orchid YouTubers remember Rick L Orchids. I remember watching something on his channel and he was talking about, or he very often left orchids overnight soaking. And he lived in a completely different climate to me, but he left them soaking because he said they will just grab hold of what they can if you water them from the top. They're not going to get anything else. So I've changed my method. I'm thinking that, okay, it's not feasible for me to say, yes, I get lots of rotted roots, therefore I water less. Well, all that does, yes, it keeps the orchid roots dry, but for the most part, all that does is prevent the orchids from getting any water, which is also not a good thing. So why not completely change the method of watering and actually leave them to soak inside some kind of tub overnight and then put them back again? I still don't have to water them really frequently, but it does mean that when they get watered, they actually get enough. They can take up what they want and then I can put them back. And I can leave them to dry out as long as they take. If it takes another 6 weeks for them to dry out, I'm not going to give them any more water, clearly. So that's what I mean by my watering method killing them. I think by inadvertently, well, not really inadvertently, by deliberately holding back on the water because I don't want the pots to rot, the roots, I have been actually preventing them from getting enough water, and that may well be why pseudobulbs year after year are getting smaller and smaller, and they very often look wrinkly. So by doing this, hopefully I'm solving that problem. So it remains to be seen if this is a solution to that problem. So what I want to know from you is, if you live in a similar climate, what do you do to water your orchids? Are you a little bit more patient than me? Do you do it the proper way by making sure that they get completely separate water, that water isn't shared? Or are you using the soaking method and actually plonking them in something and soaking them? In actual fact, for me, I found, well, I've only been doing this a couple of weeks, but I found that this is actually easier, because you can go and get the orchids, you don't have to stand there, you can just plonk them in, walk off again, leave them overnight, following day come back and take them out. And this kind of occurred to me by looking at this Coleogyne cristata over here. So you can see they all look nice and plump, those pseudobulbs. Now that's never flowered for me, and the main reason, as it happens, is that the pseudobulbs were all wrinkled. And why were they wrinkled? Because I was watering it regularly. Well, they simply weren't taking up enough water. They weren't getting the opportunity to take up enough water. It took 3 days initially for those pseudobulbs to actually swell back up again by leaving it in a tray of water. 3 days. I didn't believe it. The first couple of days and nothing happened. So this is not working. These pseudobulbs are not going to swell up. That's just what they look like, because I've never seen them before anywhere. And on the 3rd day, they all swell back up again. So I've been doing that with the Coleogyne ever since. I've also been doing it with the Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry over here, the Bulbophyllum Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. So this one over here, again, never bloomed for me, and I think that's mainly because the pseudobulbs were all wrinkled because they weren't getting enough water. Pouring water through, but it just wasn't wet enough. They need to be able to get their roots into that water, and then they can actually take up what they need. So that's what I'm going to do for the future, and let's hope that actually, Laelia Anceps just about to come out, and let's hope that actually works for me a little bit better, and I stop getting these smaller and smaller pseudobulbs and fewer and fewer blooms. We'll see what happens. So tell me what you think about that. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. Are there any other actual methods that don't involve sharing the water, but also don't involve quite as much effort and work? Again, I've seen another channel, I think it might have been Miss Orchid Girl, where she simply squirts a little bit of water into each orchid. That seems to be all she does. And if you're in a house, maybe that's all you need to do. But are they getting enough? Hers certainly look like they're getting enough, but mine don't, for whatever reason. A lot of them seem to have wrinkled pseudobulbs, so that indicates that they're not getting enough. Tell me what you think. I'm not an orchid expert, but I'll be very interested to see and hear what people think. So that's it for now. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.